Just by a show of hands, how many people have used the water system today? How many people have used the sewer system? Yeah, pretty good. Well, if you were in front of a toilet and you found it to be coin operated, how much would you pay? A dime? Quarter? Seems like a pretty good deal. We're pushing forward a budget in Fort Worth Water that will have our median water bill. We have something on the order of 232,000 retail accounts, and so the median water bill is running right about $59 for water and sewer services, so just under $2 a day. I regularly get coffee around the corner from my office at about $2.75 for a medium cup. So I really think Fort Worth and its neighbors are really blessed with reasonably priced water, and generally speaking, there has been plenty of it. I arrived here in Fort Worth on the 6th of April, and since that time there has been a significant amount of water that's fallen in our service area. I was pretty amazed actually at the amount of rain we've seen. It turns out that my previous stop in my career was in Raleigh, North Carolina. In Raleigh, North Carolina, I showed up in January of 2010, and they had just had their drought of record. In 2008, the drought of record in Raleigh, North Carolina was 36 inches of water falling out of the sky, but to them that was a drought. It's a pretty significant reduction from where they were. And in the 5 succeeding years, they had 3 of their 10 wettest years ever. So I think it's actually, I'm a curse to water sales. I'm killing it. We're really sucking air on our budget right now. So what can I say? It's a challenge. We've also had lots of I&I issues in terms of all this rain and the challenges that it represents for the sewer side of the house. Today I'm here with Buster Fischera to talk about reuse, and I just want to announce to you that I am in fact a recycled utility director. I'm excited to be here in Texas, but previously in Raleigh, North Carolina as their public utilities director. Before that, I spent a little time with an international consulting firm who I won't name. And prior to that, I retired as the general manager of a Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy, Utah being the second driest state in the country. But certainly Western water law and a lot of challenges that come along with reuse and the way that we do water law west of here. Texas seems to have its own brand of water rights. It's some sort of a combination of Eastern riparian rights and Western water law, so it's going to take me a little while to sort my way through that, but I've had a chance to move around the country. I mean, ultimately I am from planet Earth, but I was born in Walla Walla, Washington, so I'm working my way around. And at one time I had an opportunity to go and work for my consulting firm in Australia. I committed to go there for 5 years, and as we were preparing our proposal for that job, the state government said this drought has got to end. Clearly you guys don't know how to run a water system, so they statized, not privatized, they statized all the local water systems, and that proposal went away, and I didn't get the opportunity, although I did get a chance to go to Australia and work on the proposal for about 3 weeks, so there was some really good benefit from that. Water really is the first thing for all of us. You know, we work on all kinds of things in public works settings, and you know, I'm a utility director, but there are a lot of interfaces with our partners in public works. But water is really the first step in economic development. It's the first step in protecting public health, both on the drinking water side and on the wastewater side. If you look at any process flow diagram and you contemplate what reuse is really just an internal recycle loop within the control volume. That's what we're doing, and it has some challenges, but you know, we've known this for a long time. It's not rocket surgery, as I like to say. Water is the driving force of all nature, and that was a quote from Leonardo. So, you know, from the time you're really a young kid, you hear about the hydrologic cycle. You know, the clouds come in, it rains, waters the fields and the grass. There's evapotranspiration, there's surface water runoff, there's groundwater infiltration. It makes its way back to the sea where it evaporates and goes around again and again and again. Much of the water that we find in aquifers has been there for millions of years. But realistically, we would make the argument that we've been recycling and reusing water for millions of years. In the past year, Texas has had some past 5 years, pretty significant drought conditions, with drought being defined as below normal precipitation. I think that's fair to say. And this recent deluge it's kind of come out of the blue, and it has been a lot of water. So every time I've looked at a climate change model, they've talked about whether you believe in anthropomorphic climate change or not. All of the climate change models suggest more volatility, so more periods of really wet and more periods of really dry times. We were, just in the short time I've been here, we had a tropical storm Bill. It seemed to park over us and just dump an incredible amount of water. Is the drought over? Well, our former utility director, Lee, told me at a reception that he's lived in the Fort Worth area for over 85 years and has never seen all of the reservoirs full at the same time. So it is kind of a unique set of circumstances. And we've heard that it's effectively a 1 in 2,000 year sort of event. That's significant. Well, as we look into the future, what do we see? If we're going to anticipate more high highs and low lows in the hydrologic cycle, one thing we know for sure is that Texas is growing. The signs of that are everywhere. The economy is solid. Generally speaking, the climate is great, and people are moving here in large numbers. So how are we going to supply those folks with water? That's a really interesting question. I'm starting to learn how statewide water politics work in Texas, and this is a graphic that came from the Region C 2060 water plan. And it shows the different supplies where water will come from. And they've tried to anticipate how much water we will need and do a plan for that out through the year 2060, contemplating the continued growth in population. The reality is that water supply planning is changing in this country, and the truth is I don't believe we've really kept up with the changing times. For example, I've been looking at the Fort Worth per capita water usage numbers. So again, per capita water use would be how much water is diverted into our system. Generally speaking, it's diverted from the Trinity or a tributary, and we take it out, we treat it to drinking water standards, we run it through the system, we collect it back up on the sewage side of the house, we treat it to a higher level of quality than it was when we pulled it out of the river in the first place and release it back to the environment. This is a big part of our self-narrative, which is that we are protectors of the environment. That is what we do. So again, back to per capita, we're looking at, in the year 2000, about 232 gallons per capita day in the Fort Worth service area. Next year, we're projecting 152. So that's a 34% reduction in per capita diversion, if you will, from the natural systems over just a 15-year period. Think about that. That's really remarkable. And we know that we have conservation programs. There's been a lot of advertising driven by the water utilities, but I'll be honest and tell you, we probably should not be taking credit for those reductions in per capita use. I really believe that there's a couple of things at play. Two of them are systemic changes. There were plumbing code changes in the early 1990s. And most importantly, the advent of Energy Star appliances around the year 2000. I just rented a place not too far from here, and it's a 1980s vintage house. I've asked the landlord to replace the dishwasher. So I'm looking in the dishwasher, it's got a couple little rust spots. That dishwasher from the 1980s, it's an old one, it doesn't work very well, uses somewhere between 50 and 70 gallons for a load. The new one is going to use about 10% of that. So all of the new housing stock in the system is getting energy efficient appliances, water efficient plumbing, and many of the older homes, as they replace their appliances, are coming on board with newer, more efficient appliances. On top of all of that is psychology, right? So our culture is changing. People are seeing use your resources wisely messages all the time. And particularly in a drought, the people here appear to be very focused on weather. That's what I see. Weather can change here pretty quick, and there's a lot of concern for severe weather events. I would tell you that in Hawaii, they don't even have a weather person. They just have the regular talking heads say, another beautiful day in paradise, and that's it. But here, weather changes, and there's a lot of crazy things that can happen. But if you've been in a drought for 5 years, and morning, noon, and night, you're looking at the TV and you're seeing a statement that says, we're in a drought, we've got to conserve, it ultimately affects people's psychology and it changes their behavior. We have seen that. So we have this plan to develop water supplies here in our region for the next foreseeable future, let's put it like that, 45 years. And I went to the public hearing where folks could show up and talk about the plan as they saw it, mostly environmental groups trying to avoid future on-stream reservoirs. There are some plans to build some new on-stream reservoirs. With the NEPA Act and certain things like that, it's become very difficult to build an on-stream reservoir. And there were a couple of basic comments to the plan that came from that side of the house. We have to conserve more. Well, I just told you there is a very significant amount of conservation that is already on the books, and I really don't see us going back to where we were. Second, they said that we need more reuse. So that's what we're here to talk about today. I think it's really important to note that there are times when the river downstream of our wastewater plant can be 80% wastewater effluent, and it's very clean. And so if we take that water and we cycle it back up and say we run it through chillers, we do have a reuse line that goes to the airport, for example, and they use it for chillers and that water gets evaporated. That's less water that goes to downstream users. So in times of drought, reuse is an open question as to whether we're meeting the environmental and water user needs downstream of us. All right, I've been blathering on for a few minutes. Let me turn it over to Buster, and we'll talk a little bit about the specifics of our system. Buster?
Thank you, Carmen. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Buster Fischera. I've been with the Fort Worth Water Department for about 23 years now. I did a brief stint before I came here in Florida with the Pinellas County sewer system, where back in the 1980s, that we had 9 wastewater treatment plants with 0 discharges, which meant that we basically were reusing all the water back in the 80s. Most of that was going for spray irrigation, going back to golf courses. Some of it did go into deep well injection, where the water was pumped into an aquifer for storage so that at some later date they would be able to pull it back out and treat it as potable water. So the point is that reuse is not a new concept. It's been going on for a long time, whether you recognize it or not. And I think that's part of the problem that society is having with the term reuse. They consider it to be a negative term, but in fact, it's really just another source of water. There's only one water. There's a new term going around with the Water Environment Federation. It's called One Water. And it's a pretty good term, because in reality, that's right. There's only one water. What makes it different is what's in it and where it's coming from. If it's coming from the oceans, well, then it's got some salts in it. If it's coming from the groundwater, then it's got some minerals in it. If it's coming from the sky, depending on what part of the country you're in, you may have a little acid rain. I don't think we have a lot of that going on anymore. Or it may be picking up some other types of minerals. Once it hits the ground, that's where we take over and say, okay, how can we utilize this and maximize that use and very efficiently make it available in a safe fashion for public use? So So for hundreds of years, we've been doing this, and I think the big question now is, and what everybody's really gotten this dialogue going on strong now, is because of some of the things that have been going on in Big Springs and Wichita Falls, where I think you've heard of the terms direct and indirect reuse. Indirect, that's what's been going on. That is not new. I think the new concept now is direct reuse, where basically it goes straight from the water reclamation facility through more advanced treatment right into the water plants. That's direct reuse. Indirect reuse is what we term when we actually discharge the water, as Carmen was saying, into the Trinity River, and they pick it up downstream somewhere and pump it in as their raw water source into their water treatment plants. You'll see some slides later on, and you be the judge, and you tell me whether or not we've been doing indirect reuse or not. So I came up with this. I was looking at a video on water reuse, and Carmen had mentioned this as well, about basically what we do is an internal loop inside of the water, the hydrologic cycle. I'm calling it the hydrological cycle. And the reason is because from a cost perspective, it's less expensive to take the water once it's been treated one time and treat it at a much purer level at your water plant than it is to put it back into the nature where it's going to be recontaminated, okay? And then you're going to bring it back, usually through pumping, which costs a lot of money, to get it back to the same fashion that it was. And kind of show that as an example, I brought some props. This is the Trinity River. And I hope they don't fall. These three, in no particular order, is going to be tap water, reuse, type 1 reuse water from the Village Creek Water Reclamation Facility, and the water that came in the original bottle. Now, I don't know if you can tell the difference. I can, but the bottle on the far left, that's our type 1 reuse water. This is what's coming out of Village Creek. The point here of this chart is that it's going to be less expensive to go from this water to one of these two than it is from that to one of these two. So if I put my water back in here, what am I gaining? And that's the question. By the way, the source water for this, the purified, and it's called purified. And it's called purified because it's gone through RO. But it came from the city of Dallas. Okay, that's city of Dallas water that's gone through an RO system. Later on, what I'm going to be talking about, when you go from a water reclamation facility, some of the advanced treatment that they're talking about is RO. So the question begs to be asked, if I'm going to go through an RO system anyway, why would I put it back in the river where it's going to clog my filters up at twice or 5 times the rate, costing me a heck of a lot more money than if I just take it out of there? I'm going to end up with the same product. That's the point. There are some plants that do use activated carbon, and that is one of the technologies that is being looked at. There are various technologies that can be used alone or in combination to achieve the kind of quality that you want. It's almost going to be a customized system. What kind of water do you want to end up with? And if you want the best quality water, RO is the way to go right now, but it's very expensive. So we talk about reuse. Village Creek Water Reclamation Facility, that plant is designed to treat 166 million gallons a day. During the recent rain events, we were as high as 400 million gallons a day. We were getting a lot of water. However, each and every day since that plant was built and we were at 96 million gallons, we reuse 10 million gallons of water every day, this quality. Okay, if I wasn't doing that, I would be buying 10 million gallons of potable water every day, taking that water from the citizens of Fort Worth. So each and every day, 10 million gallons, I've been reusing for decades. Also, since 1998, we have a golf course, and you can see it in the lower left hand of this slide here. That's the Water Chase Golf Course. Since 1998, we've been providing Water Chase with type 2 water. Basically, it's the same water, but it's got a different set of characteristics than the good water. But very similar. As a matter of fact, today it is the same water. It's type 1. But since 1998, we've been providing them water. In 2007, when the drought issues were beginning to become an issue, the city of Fort Worth started looking into water reclamation, water reuse. What's the best way to reuse water? And there's a couple of different things you can do here. One is you can create a third utility, which is what this study was showing that we would be moving towards as a master plan. A third utility which would address the eastern corridor of Fort Worth, which was from Village Creek to the DFW airport, the central city, the Alliance Airport area to the north, the southern corridor down around Miller Brewery. There's a lot of big industrial complex down there, and of course the west side of Fort Worth. And this is a very good concept, except that laying that much pipe costs a lot. The other interesting thing about this is that when Village Creek was built back in 1958, it was built at the far eastern boundary of the city of Fort Worth. Why? Because that happened to be the lowest place in Tarrant County. And back in the 1950s and 60s, the cheapest way to get water from point A to point B was to let it flow by gravity. Great idea, until you start talking about reuse, because now you have to pump it back the other way, and it's uphill the whole way. So when you look at creating a third utility with a third set of infrastructure going uphill, reclamation and reuse starts to, you have to start looking at the numbers. Is that the best way to reuse the water that we have? This is, in fact, the route that was taken to DFW Airport. It's about 12 miles. That project was completed, I believe, I don't remember the date now, 2008, maybe. But we've been averaging about 500,000 to 1 to 2 million gallons a day going up there. We are serving 3 customers. Let's see. No, we don't have it. We're serving 3 customers right now. One is the City of Arlington, and they have the Ditto Golf Course in Dunlop Park. We're also serving the Texas Star Golf Course in Euless. The Arlington landfill uses it for dust control. The DFW Airport is going to be using it for irrigation as well as cooling water blowdown. And that's why our numbers have been pretty low with respect to the amount of volume, because we've been waiting for DFW to get their chillers online and so that they can be more consistent with the amount of water they're taking. DFW Airport was kind of like the anchor store in a mall. Okay, they're the reason why we built this, because we knew that we could sell quite a bit of water up there once they started putting their cooling water systems online. This is the pump station that was also built as part of that project. Now, to get this kind of quality water, type 1 water, it has to meet certain regulatory restrictions. It's got to have a turbidity, which means clarity, of less than 5 NTUs. It has to have a coliform counts of less than 20. It has to have a BOD of less than 5. So it's very good water. It's very, very clean water. The way you get that water, and as part of the treatment technologies that we're going to be talking about with respect to continuing this process even further, is a lot of it has to do with the deep dual media filters that we have. It's basically like it's a pool filter on steroids. I mean, you can put some water through these, and when it comes out, that's what you get. It is crystal clear water. We had to utilize UV disinfection to ensure 100% compliance with the bacterial aspects of our regulations. And as a backup and then to keep biomass from growing in the pipeline itself, we have a chlorine disinfection system as well, where we keep a residual in the pipeline. We also we had to put a pump station in, and that's a surge tank. Now, from a maintenance perspective and a management perspective for this pipeline, how do you operate it? City of Fort Worth Water Department does not have a third utility right now. Basically, the reuse program is administered through the Village Creek Water Reclamation Facility. However, it's coordinated with the other divisions as well. So we coordinate with the field operations group who handle all the pipeline work. We coordinate with the laboratory who does all the sampling. We coordinate with the water production that handles all of the electrical SCADA system and all of the online analyzers that are out there. So it's a coordinated effort that's through one individual at our facility. And it seems to be working very, very well. One of the issues that we did have was that when we built this 12-mile pipeline, it was built by 3 different contractors, and they all had to, it's kind of like building a bridge starting from 2 different sides, and you hope you meet in the middle where you're supposed to, which they did. The problem is that one of those contractors had a little financial issue, so their side of the pipe wasn't all that great, and we ended up with a lot of debris in one of the pipelines. And so we had to go in and clean it. Well, we didn't put any pigging sites in, so we had to come in after the fact, put some pigging sites in, so that we could get this thing clean and get the water through it that we needed to, meeting the compliance regulations that we had. So there are some maintenance challenges, but for the most part, ever since we've had it cleaned, this thing just runs. You know, and people who need the water, like Euless or the City of Arlington at Dunlop Park and their golf course, they basically turn the switch on, they start filling their ponds, and our pumps kick on. So this is a photograph of the UV disinfection system. We can, right now it's got a capacity of 6 million gallons a day, but it can be expanded to 18 million gallons fairly easily. We have 3 200 horsepower pumps, which have a total capacity of 12 million gallons a day. So this system is designed to handle quite a bit of flow now and going on into the future. Okay, this kind of gives you an idea how much reuse we've been doing over the years. You know, if you add it all up, the amount of water since 2011, the amount of water that we've been pumping to our wholesale customers of Arlington, Euless, and DFW Airport, the retail customers of Water Chase Golf Course, and some of this water is actually being used by frack water by energy companies for fracking wells and or drilling. And if you take into consideration the amount of surface water that we use at Village Creek, each year we're using approximately 3.8 billion gallons of water that's being reused every year, which essentially calculates out to be about 12,000 acre feet of water. And just to put that in perspective, Lake Arlington holds 45,000 acre feet of water. So once every 4 years, we can fill Lake Arlington up with the water that we've reused. That's a significant amount of water if you think about it. So this is one of the concerns with using water for irrigation purposes only. Basically what this chart shows is that you have these huge demands during the summer, and in the wintertime, nobody takes any reuse water. So it's difficult to operate a reuse system when you don't have that one major user that's using it full time. So hopefully this will level itself off as soon as DFW gets its cooling towers online. So, so moving forward, where are we going to go next? Okay, so we've already got this reuse water line that's providing direct reuse for irrigation purposes right out of the plant, and that's a good thing. But it came at a cost of a 12-mile pipeline, a pump station, routine maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. And so the next step is really, well, what's the most efficient way to reuse this water? And we've already talked about that with that internal loop. There's no reason to put it back where it came from and recycle it. So how do we get there? The problem with that is the perception. That's it. People just have this perception of where the water's coming from. The reality is that reuse water is just another source water. That's all it is. Whether it comes from, as soon as that water hits the ground from the sky, the first thing it's going to come in contact with is all the bacteria that's laying on the ground. That's fact. And that's part of the natural process that purifies the water. We're going to use we use the exact same process at our treatment plant that nature uses to purify water. We just do it a lot faster. As Carmen likes to say when he talks about the wastewater treatment plant or the water reclamation facility, we're a bug farm. That's what we are. We grow bugs, and the purpose of those bugs is to clean the water. And they're the same bugs that you find out in nature. The same bugs that are purifying the water that falls from the sky that eventually comes through the groundwater structure, the aquifers, into your lakes, into your rivers, and comes back to the water treatment plant. It's the same process. So, there are some people who just will never drink water. My mother will not drink water. She says it won't go down. I don't get it, but she'll drink iced tea. Okay, and then there are other people who really don't care. They understand that, there's only one water, and it all depends on what's in it as to whether or not, it's palatable. So you're going to have people on the extremes on both sides. This is an interesting chart, or a picture. Each one of those dots represents a facility that is discharging wastewater into an open body of water. Okay? You're in there somewhere. Okay? If you don't think that you are already participating in the beauty of indirect water reuse, take a good look at this picture. Because, yeah, you're there, and you've been there. Yes, sir.
I was a senior in college. I visited in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They were running that water through them Imhoff tanks.
Imhoff tanks. That was a long time ago.
Directly into the Mississippi. Gene Chile was picking up their potable water 100 yards downstream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, as it pertains to the Mississippi River, it has been said that by the time that water gets to New Orleans, it's already been, the entire volume of that river has been used 10 times. And that's a fact. Yes, sir.
First, great presentation. I'm David Martin from the Protection Conservation Alliance. We sponsored a bill this past session called HCR 74.
Uh-huh.
Noted direct global reuse. We passed a house by a wide margin. Go back the next time and pass the Senate. So we very much appreciate what you're doing. I just like to add one thing that we all keep in mind. That the one source we can count on, the natural resources increase in North Texas, very well, is wastewater.
Absolutely.
100,000 people a year. One reason we can be certain we won't take too much environmental load downstream is there are so much more treated municipal fluid in North Texas.
Right.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for those comments. Yeah, and the big concern, and we're going to get into that. This is just a chart that shows, in case you didn't really get the warm and fuzzy feeling off that last chart. This kind of brings it a little closer to home. These are all the wastewater plants in the north central Texas region. There's actually 88 treatment plants, and every one of them is located on a reservoir or a body of water that is used as a water source. Even Village Creek, that's sitting on the Trinity River, when we discharge our 100 million, 120 million gallons a day, downstream, probably Huntsville or Houston, certainly Houston, is picking it up. So the question is time in that perspective, because it takes time. As a matter of fact, right now, the water that we discharge into the Trinity River is picked up down around Richland Chambers by the Tarrant Regional Water District, where they run it through their wetlands, and then they pump it back uphill 70 miles, right back to where it started. It just doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so the WaterReuse Association basically says that, raw water is water that's basically been used recently. It's the quality of water is much more important than the source. And that's a fact. It doesn't matter what the source is, it's what you end up with, the quality. And that's all a function of technology. So what technology is available today? Well, you can start off with Bear Grylls and all those survivor shows that you see on TV. What's the first thing they do when they come up to a body of water? They say, oh, I've got to have some water, but I've got to purify it first. What do? They boil it. They may run it through an old dirty sock first, and then they boil it. And at that point, it's drinkable. It may not be palatable at that point. It's certainly not one of these, but at that point, that is treatment. Okay, now conventional water plants, the way they are set up today, have a series of steps: flocculation, sedimentation, pH adjustment, filtration, disinfection. We're all familiar with those. And that's what's providing one of these two in the middle. Okay. From our facility, we use a lot of bacteria because we have to not only treat the suspended material, but we have to treat the material that's dissolved in the water. Similar to, using Carmen's analogy, if you had a can of Coke that you only drank a half a can of Coke and you poured the other half down the drain, that material that's in the Coke, the sugar, is not going to settle out. You can put all the flocculation and coagulation chemicals in there you want. It's not coming out. The only way to get it out is to put bacteria in there to absorb it. And that's one of the treatment processes that are used today in conventional wastewater treatment plants, absorption. So it pulls all that out, and then we take those bugs and we either recycle them or we get rid of them in a process called biosolids processing and reuse. But once we get through the process where we are today, which is where we dump it into the river at the quality that you see there, after it's been disinfected, and then we actually have to take the chlorine, dechlorinate it as well, so it doesn't impact the environment. It's the next step. And the next step are the new technologies that are coming out: membrane bioreactors and filtration, whether it's ultrafiltration, nanofiltration, or reverse osmosis, which is the granddaddy of them all. There are also some other alternative chemical treatments that you can use for disinfection or combinations thereof using chlorine, UV, ozone, hydrogen peroxide, or peracetic acid. That one of the big concerns that people have with respect to reuse is, oh, wait a minute, what about all the pharmaceuticals? What about, am I running out of time? It's like my life ticking away before me. They're worried about the pharmaceuticals or the endocrine disruptors. Well, there's a lot of studies going on right now where this type of technology, the ultrafiltration and the combination of some of these chemicals for disinfection, UV, ozone, and hydrogen peroxide, will take out more than 90% of that material. So the technology is there. And we're talking, the levels of these contaminants that we're talking about are so low that for somebody to have, for it to have an impact on anybody, you would have to drink 5,000 gallons of water a day. So just because they detect it doesn't mean that it's an issue. You've got to look at what the values are in the samples that they're collecting. And this is just to kind of show you that the new technology, it's very efficient, it's very compact, and it produces a high level of quality. And we're there. We are at the point where we can make these changes to our system and make more water available at a much better cost to the consumer than, waiting the extended amount of time for it to go through the natural system back up into the sky and come down as rain where we have to pump it somewhere. This is a chart of the actual filtration. I don't know if you can see this, but basically if you're talking about reverse osmosis, you're able to take out things at the molecular level. So that's where the concern is where, well, what about the pharmaceuticals? What about the endocrine disruptors? You put an RO system in, it's a done deal. You don't need to worry about it. And that's the interesting part. This purified water, City of Dallas water, they've put it through an RO system. Okay? So if you did the same thing with our water, you'd end up with the same thing. So that's where the difference is. So how can reuse be brought to the communities? Well, you can join in cooperative efforts with regional facilities that have a reuse system that's already out there. If you're close to our pipeline, we would love to have you participate as part of our reuse program. Otherwise, support when you get into conversations regarding reuse water, direct or indirect reuse, be supportive of it. If you're not sure about how you feel about it, get educated about it, because the technology is available to make this very, very viable. It's something that's been going on for a long time. It's nothing new. As the speaker before us was talking about, I think it was the roundabouts, people don't like change. And this is a huge change in philosophy here. But it is safe change, and it's a good change, and it's change that we really need to embrace, because it will, in fact, ensure a very reliable, high-quality water for many, many years to come for a lot of people.